And we are moving on the next case study presentation, and it has name the European InsurTech Opportunity. And the owner of this case presentation is Samarth Shekhar from 63 Ventures.
Thank you. Check. So, welcome back to some of you who've already been with us in the first half. As I said, so this is a short session just to give you an overview of the life on the other side. So in terms of, we talked about some of the innovations or some of the ways of using data and new distribution channels and so on to create new insurance value propositions. We just look at it more from a very number-driven perspective of what is going on in that world of new startups in the insurance field using different types of technologies, and try to give you a sort of overview initially of what's going on in the world around that, and then zero in and focus mainly on what's going on in Europe, what are the opportunities we see in this space. My name is Samarth. I look at investments in Europe for an early stage venture firm called 630 Ventures. Why do you want to listen to this is basically, if you look at the insurance of the future, essentially a good parameter or a good way to measure innovation in any sector is the investments or venture capital investments or funding which is going into that sector. What are the type of startups which are getting funded, and therefore, you know, it's just a very different perspective from trying to understand the innovation, what is possible and what is still far ahead. So, sorry. Okay, if you can just help with the, yeah, I'll just keep telling you. So, basically, this is the short agenda. We look at InsurTech funding trends, who's investing, which are the companies. So these are familiar faces to most of you, or familiar companies. Look at some examples of highlights. I'll also focus a bit on life and health, and then looking at some of the areas within some of the startups in Europe or areas of innovation in Europe which are interesting and which we are watching. So this is a summary of the funding trends. So as you can see, these are in terms of the amounts which are spent by some of the big insurance players, you know, on technology. This is very insignificant, but assuming that most of the investments we make in startups tend to be anywhere between 100K to 5 million, so very small compared to some of the big IT projects or even medium-sized IT projects. To that extent, just an overview of, you know, these are deal count shows what are the number of investments made, and there on the left you see what is the total size of investment in millions. So this is just to show you the trends. Some of those outliers or those big numbers are related to very large funding rounds. In most cases, these are investments made in the big Chinese market like Zhong'an, Ping'an, or some others which we will see. In some other cases, these are later stage funding rounds of companies like Oscar Health in the US or Lemonade, which are going into the later stage. So, next. So what I did was to keep it short and, you know, also keeping you awake and colorful slides. So this is basically, this is an interesting slide taken from FT Partners, which has some great research. It's basically summarizing last 5 years of investments and just showing the biggest ones with names and numbers. So these are, what you see on this slide is a quick one-pager on which are the trends or business models or business areas within insurance which are the most most well captured by new technologies. It's one way to read this. So looking at some of the biggest bubbles, which are like Zhong'an, as I mentioned, the Chinese insurance, mostly acquiring customers via mobile. doing all of the customer onboarding as well via mobile or even via WeChat and the like. Zenefits is basically the offering to corporates, employees, insurance via that corporate and basically getting paid by the insurer when it cross-sells via this corporate. Oscar Health is one of the big, in the US, one of the big health insurance companies and probably the first one in the world to be heavily funded from the scratch, fully licensed health insurance company. So the estimate was at that time that you need 50 million to even just get the company started, and Oscar Health actually raised that amount to be even able to claim that it can start paying off or even start onboarding customers before it can start paying off. So those are some of the examples. Cambridge Mobile Telematics is around telematics, car insurance. Here you see some of the examples on which I mentioned as well, so Lemonade and so on. And then basically this is just to give you a feel of where has the big venture capital or later stage funding gone, and what are the most sort of developed startups or business areas. Then, what's the trend in terms of, so as I was sharing, probably if one of you were in the initial presentation, there was no really pressure point like there was in the financial services or banking world, which was basically the Lehman Brothers crisis or the financial crisis, which resulted in that kind of disruption in financial services or rather banking services. There was not such a shock in the insurance world, which meant it took off a bit later, so it started feeling the pressure a bit later, having seen what's possible in banking. But over the last 3, 4, 5 quarters, it's been on the rise mostly. And in terms of the overall opportunity, most people, most investors, as well as industry incumbents now believe that there is long-term bigger potential in insurance to use technology, to create new revenues, to create new products, to save more money, and all the things that CXOs are worried about. So to that extent, we only see this growing. This is not a fad, or if it was, I mean, definitely from a fintech perspective, it's something which will grow and grow. And just to show what the numbers have been in the last few quarters. Then we also try to split it by how do you see it growing or getting split based on the region. So this is an interesting one, starting like almost 8, 9 years ago. At that time, it was mainly North America, which was the center of investments. Europe was a bit involved, but as you see a lot of Asia Pacific getting in, we expect that to keep on increasing, because as I was talking to a few colleagues at lunch as well, the potential size, the number of things you can do in greenfield or emerging or less developed markets is just simply bigger. You can have a bigger pie of the value chain, so it's not just distribution and nice customer onboarding or easier customer service like it is in crowded markets like Western Europe, but everything from the beginning all the way to the end, including the actual actuarial risk and the crux of insurance, can be taken in those regions. So especially in Asia Pacific, where it is a very online, mobile-friendly market. Most of them have leapfrog. They don't have bank accounts, but they are straight away opening, online, mobile-based bank accounts, as well as online, mobile-based insurance products. So yeah, that's the one to watch in terms of the biggest size or biggest promise. Most of the work in North America and Europe is being done around using new technologies, either to reach new customers or, in the case of incumbents, also to some extent to modernize existing systems, combine existing data which has been collected over hundreds of years, convert it into usable structured formats, combine it with external data, and create value out of that. So these are two different worlds. In one case, you have the greenfield markets where you start from the scratch, much like something like Mutu Mutu. In other cases, you have a lot of data which has not yet been put into one format, not been analyzed. You're missing out on huge potential to just cross-sell, upsell to very wealthy or relatively wealthy customers who can do much more than what they have right now. So moving on further, again, just to give you, we do this because there are several funding rounds going on. We just try to give you a feel of what is. It's not to say that the biggest funding rounds are the ones which are the startups which are the most innovative or the most powerful or likely to be winners. It's just that in a snapshot of time to get, what happened last year, which were the most significant funding rounds or largest funding rounds, you just get a feel of what is going on. And this is basically to show also by, what exactly are these sectors. It's mainly focused on three areas. One is health, like health insurance, which is Alan, a large French company. Then it's a lot also on car insurance. Then a lot around data. Omnius is a big example of using or moving in existing internal data into intelligence that can be used to automate claims processing. So just to show you some examples of what's the funding in Europe. As you can see, I think there was also a question earlier during lunch, which are the countries which are strong or, in terms of, which are highly developed in terms of the InsurTech ecosystem. I would put it definitely as the UK and Germany also from here, but also a strong place from France, some from the Nordic countries as well, simply because of their affinity to mobile and their ability to adopt mobile-based solutions. So. We look at the other side now. So who are the companies which are investing in this? So there are, of course, venture capital funds, which are the second column. There are accelerators, seed, which have been very busy because there are a lot of companies which started in the last 2-3 years, especially in the InsurTech space, and they do need that very initial support system. So there were several startup accelerators or seed funds which were focused on either doing it with several corporates, or in some cases like MetLife Digital Accelerator, there were initiatives, incubators founded by single life insurance or insurance companies. The VCs are a mix of, I would say, about 60 to 70% of them are companies which are also investing in fintech and therefore logically also would like to invest in InsurTech and understand the space. The others are just big investors investing across the landscape, so not just financial services but agnostic, so across sectors. And they see this as a big opportunity as well. Also in Europe, just to give you an idea in terms of the total venture capital investment in the last 5 years, fintech and InsurTech combined comprises of around 20% of the total investment. So it is the biggest sector right now getting investments in the last 5 years. So there is a lot of promise there, plus a lot of corporate investors who set up their own funds. So Transamerica Ventures, for example, is from Aegon. A lot of the others are easier to see. So AXA Strategic Ventures, Commerz Ventures, Commerz Banks, Munich Re, etc. Then finally, some of these alternative investors, which are more asset management, private equity type of players, mainly investing in later stage bets. So this. Finally, also where. So this is these are some of the examples of what's going on in Europe. These are just some of the, so this is not current, it's based on about analysis of about 6 to 12 months ago, but these are examples in different product areas or product lines of companies which are active, and quite a few are focused on these different sectors which we see as One part is completely, basically the software needed to support insurers. So there are companies which are AI or security and so on. So very horizontal technologies which do not have much of specialization in insurance or InsurTech. The others have been, as you can see, very product-based and product-oriented. And essentially, if we have time, then we do discuss a bit on where we see some of these European companies going. But I think, is that the last slide? Can you just share? Right, so this is basically, we just want to look at the previous slide to see where it is going and which of these InsurTech players in Europe have a chance of also expanding and potentially becoming big players in the world, if not in the US, etc. And this is finally just a bit about us. So what are we looking at? So we look at, sorry, just the previous slide once more. This is the type of startups we invest in. What we want to see in the market, it's not really very B2C or very easy type of market. Insurance is boring and complex. Most of the founders who we see succeeding are actually guys aged more like us. And no offense to young founders, but most of them do tend to be, have kind of cut their teeth in complex insurance type of environments, have 5 to 10 years experience, having seen the problems, and then look at least the startups we end up investing in tend to be solving some hard problems which can help incumbents to modernize, to go to the next type of offering, use digital channels, etc.
Sorry for interrupting, but time's up.
Thanks, I'm done. Yeah.
If anyone have question, you can ask in a coffee break or one question maybe who has now. Any questions from audience? Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you as well.